Hello and welcome back, and I'm going to continue with the exploration of deep water mathematics, and in particular today explore the nature of the vital. The last time we had explored the nature of the physical, and let me just recap that our starting point was a number of similar patterns that are patterns of development of different organizations regardless of complexity and regardless of scale. And this developmental pattern goes through similar phases that we summarize as being physical, vital, and mental phases. And this led us to the notion that there is an implicit order in time. Now, when we step back and ask, why is there an implicit order in time, then that gives us insight into an implicit order in space. And we began an exploration of this implicit order in space and arrived at the hypothesis that implicit in any point in space there are four characteristics, and we represented this by four equations: one for omnipresence, one for omnipower, one for omniscience, and one for omniloving. We then went on and created a translation of sorts. So from this implicit order in each point, we came up with a set, with four sets for these characteristics that defined the architectural forces that are responsible for the development of organizations. And so we had a set for omnipresence, a set for omnipower, a set for omniscience, and a set for omniloving. This characterization went through a further translation, and in that translation we hypothesized that every single organization that exists is unique, and that there is a specific equation that can define its uniqueness, and we characterized that by the symbol SIG for signature. We came up with another equation for the emergence of the signature, and we also came up with a couple of equations to define culture. And this in itself went through another translation, and that translation refers back to our initial observation that there's a specific set of phases that any organization goes through, and these are referred to physical, vital, mental, integrated, and so on. So we have this threefold translation that basically integrates the nature of the point to very specifically what we see and experience around us practically. Now, the last time we discussed the nature of the physical, today we're going to focus on the nature of the vital. And to consider the more complete nature of the vital, what we would do is we would look at each of these four containers, if you will. So if this is the place that we're at, so this is our outer bearing and manifestation, then I would refer to this as meta level 1, this notion of the essence or of a signature behind an organization. I'd refer to this layer here as meta level 2, which is the notion of deeper architectural forces behind the play of things. And I'd refer to this notion of the implicit nature of point as meta level 3. And the hypothesis is that in considering the nature of the vital, we have of necessity to consider each of these layers and see how they interact over time. So the way I'll depict this is by stating that the vital is some kind of a function, or it's equal to an equation. So it's a combination of these equations, but certainly if we consider first of all the deepest level of the meta level 3, then what we had arrived at earlier, and very specifically for the equation for omnipower, and omnipower being the component that relates directly to vital, So if we look at this notion of omnipower, what we really have is an equation that says that the power in the system is always greater than the sum across any causal wedge from the time-space boundary 0 to the time-space boundary n, such that all the resistances that occur at the physical, the vital, and the mental are not equal to this power. So this power is greater than the sum of all resistances across any causal wedge, and therefore any organization or system that we may be considering. When we think about meta level 2, then what we have is the set of omnipower which has characteristics such as power, courage, adventure, justice, and so on. And when we consider the meta level 1, then what we have is we have an equation for the signature, which I'll specify as signature of the vital, and that's equal to some primary characteristic x with a relative weight a plus some secondary characteristics y with a relative weight b, where the secondary characteristic may repeat itself from 0 to n times, and such that x is an element of the set of power, which is this set over here, and y is an element from any of the sets of omnipower, omnipresence, omniscience, omniloving, and further, a and b are integers such that a is greater than b. And finally, when we think about the outer layer, or the layer from which we experience things, then I would refer to this as V outer and characterize that as a set that has properties such as aggression, selfishness, something like self-righteousness, a short-sightedness, and so on. So we have these four equations that define the nature of the vital. The question is, how does this come together? And I would depict the coming together as a series of concentric circles, so much like a seed, where you have at the very deepest level the metal level 3 surrounded by metal level 2, surrounded by metal level 1, surrounded by the V outer. And if we consider this to be some kind of a time encapsulation, what I'd say is at time 0, and assuming that time increases in this direction here, what I'd hypothesize is that if the entire attention and nature of the vital is purely in V outer, then over time it's going to integrate more of the deeper layers until you have an integration of V outer, meta 1, meta 2, meta 3 at some advanced period of time. Now, if I were to try and integrate this behavior into this general equation that we've come up with, what I would say is that it's going to be a function, or it's going to be modulated by certainly some kind of a sinusoid function which integrates these different layers together over time, by the function e, which generally expands out, and by pi, which shows the limit of the integration, if you will. And so I would say that this vital function is modulated by some kind of combination of sine e and pi. And here's what I would characterize finally in equation form as the nature of the vital.